The video about the Grand Carousel of 1662 affords us a very good segue into one of the most influential horsemen in history, Antoine de Pluvinel. One can see in the images produced for the commemorative book of the Carousel that riders in each quadrille demonstrate a very relaxed control over their horses in high school movements. The rider's posture is centered and relaxed. The aspect of the rider's face shows complete calmness and inner harmony, sprezzatura. Furthermore, the position of the rider's hand known as descent de main, with the looped rein showing absolute lightness. Sprezzatura is an idea put out by Baldassare Castiglione in his Book of the Courtier in 1528, insisting that the perfect courtier would, at all times and in all actions, display a confidence, a relaxed mastery that allows demonstrative ease. This relates to Louis XIV and his carousel, because a generation earlier, his father's écuyer, Antoine de Pluvinel, that insisted that sprezzatura be achieved in horsemanship of the French court. Pluvinel was a courtier to three French kings, Henry III, Henry IV, and Louis XIII, the subject of the book we are looking at, the instruction of the king in the exercise of riding horses. He had gained so much trust and influence as a horseman for Henry IV that Henry trusted Pluvinel with the education of his son. Although he did not use the word sprezzatura, his entire method embodies the concept. The horseman must guide with invisible aids, maintain a serene countenance, and ride with douceur, gentleness. Pluvinel's instruction of Louis XIII codified the critical link between elite horsemanship and the emerging image of the perfect nobleman. His influence transformed riding from a purely utilitarian military necessity into a performance, art, and sport. This was the spirit of the 134 years between the publication of the Book of the Courtier and the Carousel, which would demonstrate noblesse in very high form. Pluvinel, his academy, and his book stood in the center of that flow. We'll begin with his innovative book, L'Instruction du Roi en l'exercice de monter à cheval, which translates to Instruction of the King in the Exercise of Riding Horses. He wrote Louis XIII copious notes on horse riding, which became the book's text, illustrated to perfection by Crispien de Pas, and first published posthumously in 1623, 3 years after Pluvinel's death. The book is structured as a dialogue between Pluvinel and the king, making it unique among equestrian treatises of the period. This format wasn't merely a literary device, it reflected the actual teaching relationship between master and royal pupil. The book is structured as a series of conversations between Pluvinel himself and the king, creating an intimate personal tone that mirrors their actual teacher-student relationship. The dialogues unfold naturally, with the king asking questions as a curious student would, and Pluvinel responding with detailed explanations, corrections, and elaborations. For example, the king might ask about when to begin training a young horse, or express confusion about a particular aid, and Pluvinel would respond not just with the technical answer, but with the reasoning behind it, often drawing on his years of experience. The king asks Monsieur de Pluvinel what one must do to become a perfect horseman. The king, Monsieur le Grand. Let us find out from Monsieur de Pluvinel what is the most perfect understanding of horsemanship. I am not content to be informed as king. I want to learn its science and usage as much as it is necessary to become an excellent horseman, as well as to be able to judge those in my kingdom. Tell me, Monsieur de Pluvinel, how will you begin to instruct your pupil? Pluvinel answers, Sire, by the appropriateness and comfort of dress when his is on horseback. The king, and what is the manner of this dress? So begins the dialogue between Antoine de Pluvinel and his royal student, King Louis XIII. In answer to the question of the king, he gives a very detailed description of the clothes you can see here in the engraving shown, and in all the engravings, all the gentlemen are dressed in similar attire. He concludes the correct outfitting of an aristocratic horseman by saying, Pluvinel, in a word, sire, I wish my pupil to be dressed similarly to Monsieur Bellegarde, your chief écuyer, who is standing next to your majesty, and who still waits upon you at your court, on foot and on horseback, and who serves as a mirror and most virtuous model to all the best and most valiant lords, as he has served in this capacity 2 great kings, also my masters, as you are my master, and the one who will be my last master, if it please God. Monsieur Bellegarde is part of the institutional backbone of the equine world of the court. His title is Grande Écurie, and is often referred to in the book as Monsieur le Grand. He maintains the ceremonial and political framework that makes equestrian display central to the royal identity. If Pluvinel represents the art, Bellegarde represents the office that made that art visible, funded, and politically meaningful. The king. Now that our horseman is, as far as I am concerned, well-dressed, what else do you require of him? Pluvinel. That he be a graceful horseman. The king. Do you make a distinction between a graceful horseman and a judicious one? Monsieur Legrand relates a story about Pluvinel and a horse that top ecuers of the time had a difficult time developing. Sire, it is more than 3 years ago that I heard Monsieur de Pluvinel say that one must be a graceful horseman in order to be a judicious one. He goes on to relate a story about a barb horse he had given the king, the paragon of all riding school horses in the world, as much for his beauty and grace. He is labeled Bonite. This engraving shows the king and horse demonstrating Pluvinel's approach to horses and training. The king and horse are making eye contact in an image important in demonstrating who the horse and the rider are. We are shown the young king's natural affinity with horses and the mutual understanding between ruler and mount. This image presents the ideal of gentle leadership and the Renaissance belief that a noble horse reflects a noble soul. The eye contact and expression on horse and rider visually expresses the harmonious rapport that Pluvinel believed should exist between horse and rider. The script above the horse tells us something about the horse. In 17th century French equestrian vocabulary, bonite or bonite du cheval refers to the quality, goodness, or nobility of a horse, essentially its excellent conformation and temperament. The king, Pluvinel, and Monsieur Legrand discuss how this horse's training had been abandoned by no less a figure than Monsieur de la Brue as being incapable of being taught the courbette due to his impatience and his extreme sensitivity of mouth and chin where the curb chain rests. The king. Tell me, Monsieur de Pluvinel, what method did you use to bring this horse to reason, considering that he was so sensitive and bad-tempered that this perfect horseman and this excellent equier believed him impossible to teach the airs? Pluvinel describes starting over with volte work around the pillar in a cavesson and a snaffle in his mouth to develop chewing. As the horse began understanding what Pluvinel required of him, he began riding with a curb chain made of silk. He wanted to develop a consistent appui, or contact. He gradually altered the material of the curb bit 5 more times, progressing from the silk to braided silk and finally the metal chain, until the horse accepted the contact and developed into the wonderful horse he now is. They spoke of other horses that epitomized the ability to perform the movements that were important to them, that as a result of being developed by de Pluvinel. Pluvinel states a training truth spoken of since the time of Xenophon. As a rule, the horse must take pleasure in his work. Otherwise, he and his rider will not be able to accomplish anything that is graceful. The discussion then turns to position, and 2 engravings demonstrate Pluvinel's idea of perfect riding form. The rider should always remain erect and balanced in the center of the horse. Movement is minimum, measured, and precise. Hands move very little, and of course this is a time when riders still carried weapons in their right hand. Rein-aids were done from the left hand. The king. I hold in high esteem what you have just said. But I wish to know in detail in what manner and what order you proceed to school horses effectively and make them easy to handle, traits easily recognizable in all the horses that you have schooled in your establishment. The talk and the engravings now turn to the method Pluvinel employs to make horse rideable and pliant. In the first image, we see the horse in a cavesson of Pluvinel's design being moved around a single pillar, prompted to move with gentle use of the braided thong in Pluvinel's hand, also of his own design named by him a chambrière. What we see is the development of the volte and bend. Medieval and early Renaissance horsemen did use single posts, but primarily for breaking young horses, immobilizing them, or forcing submission by tying the head close to the pillar. What Pluvinel created was a new, humane, gymnastic use of the pillars. The horse works on the volte until he is comfortable in both directions and progresses to trot and canter. As the volte work improves, he is put, still in the cavesson, into the double pillars which he is credited with and used for gymnastic development. The trainer has to move the hind end of the horse back and forth to the right and to the left, while the front is kept more still by the lines attached to the pillars. He cautions against being too rough, for the horse will feel constrained by the cavesson, and it is possible to get an overreaction when the horse feels this constraint and limitation. He wants the horse to respond to very light aid. His goal in the double pillar work is to develop an equality of movement to both sides, which can result in straightness, elevation of the forehand, and lightness of the jaw. The horse works in the double pillar until the forehand can be raised into the developing courbette. The movement to the right and left can develop an energy which can in turn be used to develop piaffe and ultimately levade, courbette, and other airs. In his training progression, the courbette would only be attempted after the horse had thoroughly mastered collection, could perform a controlled rear passade, levade, and had developed the necessary muscular strength in its hindquarters. Pluvinel emphasized that the horse needed to understand and accept the aids that would develop the movement, rather than being startled or forced into it. When the horse can do the exercise well, then he is asked to do the same work mounted. They use a page who would be young, light, but still well-trained. He then repeats the same basic process of progressing from the volta on the single pillar up to the courbette in the volta. Here is shown a method that can be used to aid a horse who is heavy in front and can't perform the raising of the forehand, easily by using a pole to get him to jump. He has certainly elevated the forehand. Pluvinel was a horseman and an innovative trainer of men and horses who substantially improved the quality of equitation and of the horse and human relationship through his insistence on progressive and logical training. Through the engravings, we can trace the development of the horse who is now ridden by the page. Beginning again on the single-track simple volte, he develops strength and can do a levade. Speed is gradually increased until trot becomes the gallop and finishes in what Pluvinel calls full speed or terre à terre. Terre à terre is a two-beat canter in which the front legs go up together and then down together, followed by the back legs up together and back down. This video demonstrates the courbette of the time in a performance of Baroque riding. It is the foundational movement, along with piaffe of the airs above the ground. The video also shows a pattern called la sarabande, which has courbette moving left and right and forward and backward in a cross pattern. He works the horse in a lateral way around the pillar at first for suppling and strengthening in movements that have become shoulder in and haunches in, and then reaches the ability to perform the volte in a courbette, as we saw done in the video. Here, perhaps, the volte left at terre à terre has been amplified into a ballotade or croupade. The next engraving demonstrates a volta right in the manner of what we would call traverse today, but of course more in courbette elevation than what we require in modern riding. I believe this is showing the same exercise in the moment of suspension or jump, as we can see the back legs have left the ground. This appears to be the same volte to the left. It appears that the rider is holding his switch in such a way as to encourage the horse to rotate to the left. Here ends Book 1, demonstrating the training of the horse, and will be followed by Book 2, in which the king begins his own training in the methods of Antoine de Pluvinel.